Right, this is the second lecture on research design. Um, so one of the first things that we need to do is really understand the nature of the research design. Is it exploratory, or are we actually trying to have some sort of conclusive research design, as in we are actually trying to make decisions as opposed to just exploring. So let's consider all those aspects in a little bit more detail below. First of all, the types of research. Obviously, looking at exploratory research. As I've mentioned to you, this is really how one goes about. It's largely unstructured, helps to formulate the marketing problem, and it's, in a sense, it's a form of brainstorming. And there are a number of ways that one can go about doing it. As we've touched on some of these aspects before. Secondary data analysis, which is looking at information that already exists. Chatting to experts in the field, that's always a good idea. Even if somebody's not an expert, I would suggest that you chat to them and get some insights from them. Then there's pilot studies. So it's really small scale exploratory research. And it's normally done in research just to get a sense of what people think. And what we usually do with our research is that if we've got a questionnaire, we run a small pilot study to make sure that people actually understand the questions. And that's just one way of approaching it, or one approach to it. One can use pilot studies to try and get a better sense of the broader problem as well. And the ways of doing it is focus group interviews, interactive media, via blogs perhaps, or even Facebook or Instagram, and just get a sense of what people think. There are also projective techniques. It's just really saying, well, how does this, for example, how does this picture make you feel? What do you think about this? Or you could even phrase it slightly differently. How would the consumer feel about this? So the person doesn't feel as if they are obliged to give their opinion. And then in-depth interviews, unstructured interviews with the consumers or anybody you're researching is always a good idea. It always gives you insights because it allows you to probe, which quantitative approaches won't allow you to do. Case studies, really the objective of doing case studies is to get some ideas and see if you can apply them to your context. Excuse me, I'm not quite sure why this is going like this, but just a way of going through it again. Okay, there are two basic types of research. There's the descriptive research, and then there's the causal research, and that's really taken up by laboratory experiments and field experiments. So if one's looking at descriptive research, this is usually the type of research which is typically done with marketing research, or mostly done, possibly is a better way of putting it, and really comprises two types of studies: a longitudinal study and a cross-sectional. Longitudinal is really where a study is done over a period of time, so it's a way of measuring perhaps things like changing perceptions over time, whereas cross-sectional studies are done at a particular point in time. Obviously longitudinal studies, a lot of resources are required in terms of money and human resources, whereas cross-sectional studies are a lot less expensive. So typically cross-sectional studies are the type of studies that are done in marketing research and also academic research. Looking at causal research, this is really focused on cause and effect, as opposed to descriptive, where we're trying to look at relationships and are largely driven by hypotheses. So as I mentioned to you earlier, it's a case of do we find evidence against the null hypothesis, therefore we accept the alternative hypothesis. So it's not cause and effect per se. Causal research is really where one tries to look at cause and effect, and one can do that in laboratory experiments, and I gave you an example earlier on in one of the previous lectures about how a colleague of mine uses a technology to track people's eyeballs to make to see which particular aspect of an advert they look at first, and also field experiments where you do test marketing. That's also a way of doing actual causal research. Okay, so that suggests that there are a lot of different research designs available. So typically, as a market researcher, you'd have to make a decision, and there are a number of factors that can be considered: time and money, the availability of resources, the research problem, the aim of the researcher, the availability of scientific information. Perhaps there's secondary resources which will solve the problem. What is known about the area? Is it blue sky? Is it something new? Is there data that one can use and just run? Have you got the data sources available? Capacity, obviously, the extent to which managers buy into the research. They may think, this is a bit of pie in the sky type of thing. So that is an important corporate political game that one sometimes needs to play. The ability of the researcher, and there may be other factors which you can't control or maybe can control. So in terms of planning the research project, one has to identify the data requirements, determine the sources, just going through a summary, identify the data sources, and this really only applies to BEC 324E. It's not that it's not important, it's just that in terms of the university requirements, BEC 321 is a 8-credit course, and BEC 324 is a 16-credit course. So clearly there needs to be some distinction between the two, and this is one of the areas which differentiates the two courses. So I'll see 324E in the next chapter 5 lecture, and with BEC 321E you can go straight to chapter 6.